What's going on, guys, and welcome to my Friday Night SmackDown audio review for December 1st, 2023. I am Graham G.S. Matthews. Hope you guys are doing well, having a great month of December so far. Good addition to SmackDown this week, I thought. Nothing really overly eventful, but we did get the return of the Viper, Randy Orton, to the blue brand for the first time in about a year and a half, since he was actually injured back in May of 2022 by the Bloodline. Now finds himself back on the blue brand, signing with SmackDown at the end of the show. That was kind of like the show-long storyline with Nick Aldis, Adam Pearce, showing up to recruit Randy Orton to their respective brands. Ultimately, Nick Aldis put pen to paper with Randy Orton and is now officially a member of the SmackDown roster, I believe for the first time, if I'm not mistaken, since 2019, I want to say. Now, he's appeared on SmackDown since then, obviously. Like I said, his last appearance before getting injured was on SmackDown back in 2022. But I think officially, he has not been a member of SmackDown since late 2019, so in about 4 years, which is a long time. He was on SmackDown from 2016 to 2019, and before that from 2011 to 2013 or whatever it was. And obviously, he also debuted on SmackDown back in 2002, had that short stint on SmackDown back in 2005, 2006. So he has his fair share of history on SmackDown. I'm glad he's sticking with the blue brand. We'll get into that. A good episode overall, I thought. We had Bobby Lashley versus Butch in a follow-up from last week's SmackDown Lowdown. More on that momentarily. Santos Escobar taking on Joaquin Wilde. Kevin Owens taking on Grayson Waller. The return of the United States champion, Logan Paul, making his first appearance on SmackDown since becoming the champion about a month ago at Crown Jewel. Bianca Belair still has a fight to, a war to wage with Damage CTRL. Not a big fan of that. We'll get into that momentarily as well. And an appearance from LA Knight at the end of the show as well. And we also have a very notable name appearing on SmackDown next week, which I'll get to at the end. So we'll get to the opening segment here. Charlotte Flair and Shotzi saving Bianca Belair from Damage CTRL after Bianca kind of made it known that her fight with Damage CTRL is far from over, despite winning War Games. That is literally what she said. Maybe not word for word, but she basically said, yes, we won at War Games, but my war with Damage CTRL is far from over. And I said, I fucking rolled my eyes at that line. Not because I don't like Bianca, but because she specifically, even more so than Shotzi or Charlotte or whoever, has been feuding with Damage CTRL for almost a year and a half now. Since SummerSlam 2022. Since August of last year. Not exactly a year and a half, but we're rapidly approaching that point. It's been a long fucking time. I mean, not consistently a year and a half, but for a long stretch of time last year, from SummerSlam to Survivor Series, Bianca moved on to other opponents as Raw Women's Champion. Damage CTRL moved on to other opponents, and now they find themselves back in the same vicinity on SmackDown. And they've been feuding pretty much on and off since right after WrestleMania, when Io Sky first challenged for the championship at Backlash fell short, rekindling that rivalry around SummerSlam time. And here we are, still here. Bianca's still feuding with Bayley and Io and Dakota, now Kairi and Asuka as well. It's just ridiculous. So, again, like I said, Damage CTRL coming out. No Bayley. Bayley was not out there. Again, further teasing tension within the ranks of Damage CTRL, specifically with Bayley, not the other members. But we'll get to the Bayley development at the end in the Bianca versus Kairi matchup. But that's what this set up. Charlotte and Shotzi coming out to even the odds. I'm fucking done with this. And listen, I've said this before. I like the Women's War Games match on Survivor Series last Saturday. Here's the thing, though. You don't do War Games if it's not meant to finish the feud. In WWE, whether it be NXT or the main roster so far, really hasn't had this issue. Now, I know last year Kevin Owens continued to feud with the Bloodline in the weeks and months following Survivor Series because they wanted him to be next in line for Roman's championship. Even though he did nothing to deserve it, he fucking lost in War Games. I think he even got pinned in that matchup. But still, that was kind of excusable. But at least Drew and the Brawling Brutes, including Sheamus, all moved on from the Bloodline after War Games last year. Unless I'm mistaken, and I think they may have had more matches even after that, maybe in the weeks following, but not long term. I fucking hate when they continue to do this bullshit where you have this big blow-off match, whether it be War Games or Hell in a Cell or an Iron Man match or whatever, and they continue to feud. AEW has the same issue, but WWE, I mean, it's been an issue for a lot longer than AEW's even been around. And I'm thinking, I understand the issue in that the story they're telling right now, which is compelling, it has my attention, with Bayley in the process of being outed from Damage CTRL, leaves the other babyfaces, Charlotte, Shotzi, and Bianca, and even the other babyfaces, Zelina Vega and Michin, with nothing to do. Because Bianca, Shotzi, and Charlotte have all at one point or another challenged Io for that championship and have all fallen short. Shotzi might be the only one who hasn't faced Io lately. I might be wrong on that, but I know Bianca obviously did at Crown Jewel. Charlotte did on SmackDown about a month or so ago. They've all faced Io, and they have all fallen, including in multi-man matches. Bianca has gotten at least one or two opportunities. Charlotte got at least one or two opportunities in a triple threat at Fastlane and again on SmackDown. It's time to move the fuck on. They beat Damage CTRL, but their issues with them aren't over because Io's still the champion. Dude, I mean, I'm not saying Io should drop the championship. She has been an excellent champion so far, but we gotta find a way for Bianca and Charlotte to move on from this feud without setting their sights on the championship. I love Bianca. I actually really like Charlotte Flair as well. I'm not sure if that's a popular opinion at this point. I like Charlotte a lot as well. They do not, at this current point in time, need to be in the title picture. Their feud, their bad blood, their matches, what have you, have been done to death with Io Sky. It's time to move on. And I think turning Bianca might be the way to go. The issue is that all of your heels on SmackDown at this point, they're all in Damage CTRL. I'm not sure if there's anyone on SmackDown that is not in Damage CTRL that's a heel. I'm pretty sure all 5 heels on SmackDown for the women are all in Damage CTRL. And that's fine. It adds, dominance to the Damage CTRL numbers. And Bayley's going babyface at some point. When she gets kicked out of the group, she's going babyface. The question then becomes, who do you turn heel? I would turn Bianca or Charlotte. Charlotte is obviously a natural heel. But I think Bianca, we haven't really seen yet on the main roster. So I would do that personally. I would like to see that Bianca-Charlotte rivalry storyline rekindled starting now going into WrestleMania. It might be too early now for them to turn Bianca and to keep them apart until WrestleMania, but I wouldn't put them in the championship match. They'll probably fucking end up in the title match. It'll probably end up being Io, Bayley, Bianca, and Charlotte, which I fucking hate because, again, Bianca and Charlotte do not need to be in the title picture of WrestleMania. Give them their own non-title match. How refreshing would that be? To have a non-title women's match at WrestleMania that's a singles match. We got a non-title women's match at Mania last year, that 6-woman tag team match, and it was a pretty good match. Becky and Trish, Lita versus Damage CTRL, Bayley, Io, and Dakota. And it was a good match, but we don't need to have like multi-women matches or 4-ways and triple threats. Just give me a fucking one-on-one match that's not for a championship. You do it with the men. And now with 2 nights of WrestleMania, there's no excuse to not do Charlotte and Bianca or some form or variation of that at Mania one-on-one with no championship implications. And you can sell people on that matchup with an interesting enough feud leading up to WrestleMania without not even any stipulations, because if you had a stipulation like no holds barred or whatever, but you don't need to make it for a title. They need to learn that lesson with Charlotte, and now it's becoming an issue with Bianca as well, because Bianca has never not been in the title picture all 2023 long, and really dating back to the summer of 2022, because she was champion for over a year, and she went away for like a month or two, but now she's back again in the fucking title picture. But Bianca's been in the hunt for the title, whether as champion or as a challenger, since when? We're talking since she became champion at SummerSlam, and then before that, actually she became champion at WrestleMania last year. So I'm thinking she won the belt at SummerSlam. So even before that, probably since early 2022, it's been almost 2 years that Bianca in some form or fashion has been in the title picture on Raw and on SmackDown. It's time to move on. We had Bobby Lashley taking on Butch one-on-one. Like I said earlier, this was set up via last week's SmackDown Lowdown. As someone who watches the show, reviews the show, I would like to see more crossover between SmackDown and the SmackDown Lowdown. They even showed the clip of what set up this matchup, so I appreciated that. No Ridge Holland at ringside for Butch. The Street Profits were in the corner of Bobby Lashley. I don't remember if they interfered or not, but I thought Bobby and Butch had a decent matchup. The crowd was super behind Bobby Lashley. I felt bad for Butch. I felt bad for Pete Dunne, which they have to start calling him soon. I mean, the rebrand has got to be coming on the sooner side. Ridge will probably reappear one of these weeks and beat the shit out of Ridge Holland. Ridge will probably reappear and beat the shit out of Butch, I mean to say. And maybe that might be enough to turn Butch back into Pete Dunne. Sheamus, I thought he'd be back even here. I thought when Bobby and the Profits were kind of beating on Butch, I'm thinking Sheamus might reappear and realign with Butch, and we get Butch and Sheamus against the Profits or something. That might still happen. But I think a Butch Ridge Holland program is coming. It's going to be hard to get people invested in such a match if no one gives a fuck about Butch if he keeps losing and people are siding with people like Bobby Lashley. Bobby and the Profits are just so great together, it's going to be hard to make them a heel trio. They're going to have to do some more heelish shit for people to dislike them. This Brooklyn crowd, which was very hot for the better part of the night, was very much behind Bobby Lashley for almost the entire match. And even beforehand when he cut his quick promo. So they're going to have to kind of tweak that heel presentation. I thought the Bobby Profits matching gear, he was kind of wearing, I mean, they weren't wearing gear, they were wearing suits, but he was kind of wearing Profits-esque gear, which I thought was cool. They're just fucking cool. Like, it's going to be hard for people to boo them, so they need to work on that, and they also need to work on making Butch cooler, too. The name, for starters, will not, change his career and really help his career drastically, but I think it would make a difference to start calling him Pete Dunne instead of this dumb Butch crap. Santos Escobar taking on Joaquin Wilde. I think Wilde actually mentioned on Twitter either last night or earlier today that this marked his first singles match in over 3 years. And they joined Legado del Fantasma about 3 years ago. So it sounds like he has not had a, which I can't remember anyway, even in NXT. I don't think he's had a single singles match since that time, since joining Legado del Fantasma, which is crazy. That's fine. I mean, I like Wilde. I like Del Toro. They're good workers and whatever. They were very good in the role of Legado del Fantasma. It seems like they're not being reunited with Escobar. It seems like they might go forward with the idea at some point of doing Escobar with Angel and Humberto. Angel Garza and Humberto Carrillo, who recently returned to NXT. They've been losing a lot there, so they might not be long for that brand. I like that idea. I just feel like it kind of leaves Wilde and Del Toro as the enhancement team on SmackDown, which I guess they kind of were anyway. But this, without a group, I mean, I guess they're still technically in the LWO. I think Wilde came out to the LWO music here. Without the LWO, on their own, they're fucking doomed. They might as well be hit row at that point. So that I kind of worry their future without Escobar by their side. But I thought it was a fun little sprint. Wilde scoring some offense before eating defeat. Good match here. Escobar continuing to beat down Wilde afterward. Cruz Del Toro did not make the save. I don't know where he was. I mean, he might be still selling an injury or something. I'm not sure. But out comes Dragon Lee in a continuation of their bad blood and their run-in from Survivor Series from Escobar and Dragon Lee. Lee getting the better of Escobar here. And we found out next week, we found out later on in the show that next week they will be going one-on-one again in a rematch from Survivor Series. And my only hope is that it's going to be a bit longer than the match we got at Survivor Series. I enjoyed the match at Survivor Series for as long as it lasted. I thought that was a really fun match. But I do think they got to be given more time. So I'm really looking forward to that one. Hopefully they can be given some more time than what they got at the pay-per-view. Kevin Owens coming out to confront Logan Paul, who was out there just kind of running his mouth as the United States champion, talking shit, blah, blah, blah. So Logan Paul, before Owens even came out, announced that as the United States champion, he is declaring a number one contenders tournament, where the winner will earn the next shot at the United States Championship. And this tournament will include, I don't have the names in front of me, so let me just go off of memory. It's going to include Karrion Kross, who we have not seen on SmackDown in probably a month or two, facing Bobby Lashley next week. A fresh matchup, and I'm looking forward to that matchup. But it is interesting that we're getting a heel versus heel matchup. This tournament might have more heels than baby faces. So it's interesting that they're putting like Karrion Kross in there and not Cameron Grimes, who has been on SmackDown more recently. I guess that just goes to show you what they think of Cameron Grimes, which really isn't much at all. But anyway, so it's Karrion Kross and Bobby Lashley in a first-round matchup next week. Also in another first-round match next week, Santos Escobar and Dragon Lee. So that will be a tournament match in their rematch next week on SmackDown, which should be great. The other names included in the tournament, Kevin Owens, Austin Theory, Grayson Waller, and an NXT superstar whose identity was not revealed. So I guess we'll find out in 2 weeks when they do the next first-round matches. We're getting 2 next week. I would assume 2 the next week as well, the following week. We'll probably find out then. Who that could be, I honestly have no idea. They've had plenty of NXT superstars appear on SmackDown recently in the last year. We've had an Axiom appearance. We've had Toxic Attraction pull up to SmackDown. Not that Toxic Attraction are in this tournament, but I'm just saying it could be any random, like it could be someone we're not even thinking of. It could be someone like a Nathan Frazier. You know what I mean? It could be Trick Williams. It could be a call-up. It could be like a Braun Breaker, which I honestly think would be very refreshing because he's well overdue for a SmackDown or Raw call-up. Like well overdue. So Braun Breaker would be awesome. We currently have a heel United States champion, so if he was in the tournament, he wouldn't win. Maybe he could set up his next program. Kevin Owens interrupting Logan Paul here tells me he is winning this whole thing. And he's probably facing, because I don't think Theory and Waller are facing each other. Owens went on to beat Grayson Waller here, so he's probably, my guess would be, it's probably going to be a babyface. So if we're getting 2 matches next week, that leaves Owens, unless I'm getting the names wrong here, that leaves Owens, Theory, Waller, and the NXT Superstar. Owens will probably face Theory, I would have to think. He already faced Grayson Waller here and won in a good match. I enjoyed that. And then we're probably going to get Austin Theory against an NXT Superstar. Grayson Waller against an NXT Superstar. Braun Breaker would be fine, but Braun Breaker is a heel, and I wouldn't debut him against a fellow heel in Grayson Waller. I know they have history from earlier this year when he beat him twice for the NXT Championship in those series of matches and whatnot. I wouldn't do Braun Breaker in that case, especially if it's not meant to be his call-up. If they have no plan for the guy, do not make it Braun Breaker. It'll probably just be a random person from NXT. Axiom would be fine. Nathan Frazier is my pick. I think you have Nathan Frazier beat Theory. I mean, that would make Waller and Theory look like dopes to be just not even advancing past the first round, but we know they're not winning anyway, so whatever. And then I guess it would be Nathan Frazier versus Grayson Waller in the next round, or not Grayson Waller versus Kevin Owens if he beats Austin Theory or Waller, whatever the case might be. I'm not really sure, but that's my current speculation. So Owens did beat Grayson Waller on this show. They had a good matchup. I think Kevin Owens wins the whole thing. I don't see any reason why he shouldn't. They did not announce when that match would be taking place. Now, the Royal Rumble is in about a little less than 2 months. It's at the end of January. It's December as we speak right now. That's still a lot of time. They're probably going to wrap up the tournament, I would imagine, by the end of the month. So they could very well do that United States Championship match on like the first SmackDown of 2024. The only reason I would say they will not do that is because we have not seen Logan Paul wrestle on TV yet. The only matches he's had so far in WWE have all been on pay-per-view. He's been a pay-per-view guy so far. Crown Jewel, SummerSlam, WrestleMania, Royal Rumble, blah, 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 Money in the Bank. He hasn't wrestled on TV yet. So, with that being said, I imagine they'll probably hold off in whatever match they're going to do with Logan Paul until the Royal Rumble. Kevin Owens makes the most sense. He's not facing Theory. He's not facing Waller. I doubt he faces an NXT Superstar. Bobby and Karrion, unless they turn one of them, are both heels. I don't know how well they would match up with Logan Paul anyway. Could you imagine Karrion Kross and Logan Paul? What a weird matchup. And then the other matchup, Dragon Lee and Santos. I mean, Santos, I know, beat Dragon Lee at Survivor Series. Maybe Santos doesn't advance because Carlito comes back and distracts Santos. That's a possibility. I don't know if we need to be getting Dragon Lee and Logan Paul so soon. It really should be Owens and Logan Paul at the Royal Rumble for that championship. I think they can go in there and have a quality matchup, and I think long term, it really should be LA Knight being the one to take that United States Championship from Logan Paul. That's my opinion. We had Bianca taking on Kairi Sane in a pretty quality matchup, and I believe, in what someone said on Twitter, their first singles match in WWE in almost 5 years since they last faced off on an episode of NXT in early 2019, which is crazy. I think they also had a match, did they not, in the Mae Young Classic? I'm pretty sure Kairi beat Bianca. I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken. I know Kairi's first round match in the Mae Young Classic, I don't know why I remember this, was against Tessa Blanchard and she beat her. Maybe it was the second round matchup. I'm pretty sure they had a match in that first Mae Young Classic, and Kairi obviously won because she won the whole thing. So they ran it back here. Good match. Bianca wins. The only thing I did not like about this, and I know the finish was meant to further tease tension between Bayley and Damage CTRL, I get it, that Kairi took the loss. I didn't like that. Kairi should not be losing clean at this point in her run. She just came back. She's a bit of an afterthought so far, but I'm not really surprised by that because the focus is on Bayley and the champion, Io Sky. Dakota Kai's doing the talking, and Asuka's a bigger name. So clearly, Kairi is like the fourth or fifth wheel so far. She's just there to be added to the group. Hopefully at some point that changes and she can get more of a spotlight on SmackDown because she's a great hand and I think her being back is awesome. But so far, she's really hasn't really done much, and I thought this was a good match. I just probably would not have had her lose clean here. If there was any match on the show to do a DQ finish for, and we had no DQ finishes on the show, refreshingly, it would have been this one. We then get to the main event segment with Nick Aldis, Adam Pearce in the ring, attempting to sign Randy Orton to a contract. Orton comes out, rips off his shirt, poses, Brooklyn crowd going crazy, and they both make their pitches. And they were throughout the show to each other as far as what they were willing to do to get Randy Orton on their show. Adam Pearce said, listen, if you come to my show, I will give you the winner of Rollins and Jey Uso for the World Heavyweight Championship. And Orton was clearly considering this until Aldis spoke up and said, if you sign with SmackDown, I will give you the men that took you out the bloodline. Now, he did not say an undisputed WWE Universal Championship match with Roman Reigns, but you know it was implied. You know that's coming, probably at the Rumble. Orton didn't say Roman's name specifically on Raw, but you know they're holding off on that until we get to that point because we're not quite there yet. But that was enough for Orton to make his decision before being laid out by the Bloodline, actually, Solo and Jimmy Uso, before LA Knight, who I did not think would make an appearance on the show because he had not appeared up to this point, coming out to a massive reaction in front of the Brooklyn crowd, laying out Jimmy Uso, taking out Solo. He brawled with Solo to the back. Orton laying out Jimmy Uso with an RKO. Takes both contracts and Batista style from 2005. That's what this reminded me of, with the thumbs up, the thumbs down. Not quite as iconic, but that was kind of what it gave me vibes of, and that was such a great segment. And I wasn't even a fan watching wrestling at that time, but going back and watching it, what a great fucking moment and a great fucking segment. Anyway, so Orton takes both contracts, looks at both of them, chucks the Raw one, signs with SmackDown, ink to paper, puts pen to paper, and is officially a member of the Blue Brand. Nick Aldis in the ring, all happy, getting Orton on SmackDown, knowing he landed such a big free agent for his show, before being laid out with an RKO out of nowhere. Nick Aldis, I love you, my man, but you're still new to the game. You gotta know that the RKOs come out of nowhere, and you gotta have eyes in the back of your head. So, you know what? When I see that, it'll probably be nothing, because Orton RKOs everybody. I would set up Orton and Nick Aldis for WrestleMania. Now, that might sound like an exaggeration, but when I see that, and that was Nick Aldis' first bump in WWE, and he sold it like a fucking champ. What a great RKO, and they got a great reaction too. And it wasn't like Orton sold it like he was a heel. He sold it like, hey, what the fuck, like whatever. Like, you got to know the deal, dude. I'm going to lay you out with an RKO. That's what I do. At the end of the day, Nick Aldis didn't respond on Twitter as if he was pissed, because he's not really a heel so far. But he is an authority figure. You put your hands on an authority figure. It shouldn't be the Authority 2.0, but Nick Aldis at a certain point between now and Mania, at least this is what I would do. He makes life a living hell for Randy Orton on SmackDown. He gives him Roman Reigns. He fails. And honestly, after this segment, on a side note, I would not do Roman and Randy one-on-one. I would love to see it, but if LA Knight is still in the Bloodline mix, how does he factor into the Royal Rumble and not get another match with Roman Reigns? I didn't think he would, but someone pitched this to me on Twitter, and AJ Styles also still has to come back. We have not seen Styles, I think, since September, almost 3 months ago at this point, which is crazy that he's been gone for that long. He also has unfinished business with the Bloodline. He should come back, wanting a match with Roman Reigns in the Bloodline. I think in the Royal Rumble, honestly, it should be, maybe you could do Roman on the first SmackDown of the year, defending against one of these people one-on-one. I mean, again, I doubt Roman works SmackDown at this point. I know he did a year ago, he hasn't since. But I would do it the Royal Rumble, Roman, Randy, AJ, and LA Knight in a Fatal 4-Way. We haven't seen Roman in a Fatal 4-Way yet. I don't think, right? He had that triple threat at Mania back at 37. And I'm not sure he's had another multi-man match since then. So that's what I would do. I think that'd be pretty cool. If all three men that all have issues with Roman Reigns before he hopefully likely loses to Cody Rhodes at WrestleMania, he faces all of them simultaneously at the Rumble and somehow finds his way out on top, winning the champion, or retaining the championship or whatever. That's what I would do personally. But as far as Orton goes, because we've all been wondering all week long, and I said this on Wrestle Rant Radio, and a lot of other people have been speculating, what do you do with Randy Orton at WrestleMania? What does his WrestleMania match look like? Because a lot of the WrestleMania card, honestly, at this point, even 3 or 4 months out, kind of writes itself. Jimmy and Jay, probably Rollins and Punk at this point, if not Punk and Austin, which is a whole other discussion. But Rollins and Punk, Cody and Roman, Rhea and Becky, Bayley and Io, or some sort of variation of that. And the list goes on and on. What do you do with Randy Orton? Now, 2 options that came to mind for me when I was discussing it on Thursday were the Judgment Day, a.k.a. Finn Balor. And that doesn't really feel like a marquee match at this point. It's a fresh match that I want to see. But Orton, or Balor specifically, has been so beaten down. Priest is Mr. Money in the Bank. Rhea is the de facto leader. Dominic gets so much heat that Finn Balor's kind of forgotten about at this point. I don't think Orton and Balor is a WrestleMania-worthy match right now. Maybe a Raw main event-worthy match. But Orton then signed with SmackDown. And also, this segment would have meant more if the brand split meant more and they gave us more of a reason to give a shit about people switching shows, because so far people show up whenever they please. We still have no fucking clue why Cody Rhodes saved LA Knight a couple weeks ago on SmackDown. Not only why he saved LA Knight, because I know he has his own issues with the bloodline, but how he was able to appear in the first place. Like, why was he there? We saw him meeting with Nick Aldis earlier in that show. We never got any explanation for why he was on that show. So, again, when people can show up at random, it doesn't really mean anything when you sign with one show or another, because Orton might still appear on Raw one of these days. If he's supposed to be on SmackDown, what's stopping him from going to Raw? You know what I mean? And until it's convenient for them to tell the story, oh, you're not supposed to be here, get off my show. But anyway, Balor was one option, which doesn't look likely at this point. And the other option to me was Solo Sikoa. Now, again, that also feels like a television match, but you have to remember Solo Sikoa, quote-unquote, retired John Cena at the Crown Jewel pay-per-view a month ago. He beat him decisively, pretty much squashed him in the end. And I thought it was a pretty good matchup. So he's got that heat, he's got that momentum. How do you pay that off? Well, you have him go to WrestleMania, get a singles match of his own, and take on Randy Orton. Now, the only issue with that is that Solo was not there when Orton got beat down and injured by the Bloodline back in May of 2022. Now he could become an enemy of Orton. Orton is already targeting everyone in the Bloodline, but he might become an enemy of Orton in the weeks ahead, but maybe costing him the championship at the Royal Rumble or whatever. That seems like the most likely matchup. I would just not completely count out the possibility of Orton maybe facing Aldis. That would be a great in-ring debut for Aldis as an authority figure. Maybe he's the one that kind of cost Orton the opportunity. I don't know. He's the one pulling the strings. At the end of the day, you don't disrespect authority. And Orton did just that. And he got a great reaction for it, but you can't be doing that and set this precedent now that you're on SmackDown. You can do whatever the hell you want. It's the Aldis era now on Friday nights. Can't be disrespecting Nick Aldis. I would do Nick Aldis in Orton Mania, personally. And that can be the transition to a Nick Aldis in-ring run or pulling a William Regal 2008, where he's both wrestling and serving as the SmackDown general manager. And maybe that's enough for William Regal to step in. Now I'm just fantasy booking here. And take over for Aldis as the SmackDown GM. I can go on and on, but that's what I would do personally. Overall, a good show, I thought. A great closing segment. Not the best edition of SmackDown, but a solid follow-up show coming off of Survivor Series last week. We did find out next week on SmackDown, I already mentioned this, but we're getting 2 tournament matches. Dragon Lee versus Santos Escobar in the first round of the United States Championship #1 Contenders Tournament, and Karrion Kross and Bobby Lashley, same circumstances. We're getting Charlotte Flair versus Asuka for maybe the upteenth time, the millionth time next week, which they always work well together. Again, can we keep Charlotte and Asuka separate for the next 5 years? I feel like we've seen this match a million fucking times. This year alone. But seriously, it's time to move on. We're getting Charlotte and Asuka next week, and an appearance for the first time in almost a decade from CM Punk on SmackDown next week. So CM Punk's returned at Survivor Series a week ago. He wasn't even back in the company as we spoke at this time a week ago. He'll be on SmackDown next week, and he appeared on Raw this past Monday. His first SmackDown appearance since January of 2014, actually. I almost said 2020-something. No, 2014. In almost a decade. The best part about it, I will be there to enjoy it. I love that Punk is back. I've already spoke my mind on it and whatever. Obviously, it's got his issues. I wasn't a big fan of his Raw promo on Monday night. I'm a Punk mark. I'm looking forward to seeing him back in person in a WWE ring next week. I will be there in Providence for that show. It is a Tribute to the Troops themed edition of SmackDown. They're not doing their own Tribute to the Troops like special. That's what they've done in years past, where they'll tape SmackDown and then tape a separate special for Tribute to the Troops like right afterward and then air it on Fox like soon after, or NBC or whatever. They're not doing that this year. They're just making SmackDown Tribute to the Troops, which I like. I've never been to a Tribute to the Troops show, so that should be a fun time, and I think it's going to be cool. I'm looking forward to SmackDown next week, so I enjoyed the Blue Brand this week. Looking forward to being there next week. I'm also hoping to be at Deadline next Saturday because they're going to be in Providence for SmackDown on Friday and then NXT Deadline on Saturday in Bridgeport. So it's going to be a very busy weekend. I should have my in-depth review, on-site report from SmackDown up here on the channel on early Saturday, as we usually do before I take off for Deadline, but time will tell. Thank you guys for checking out my SmackDown audio review for this week. I appreciate it. Be sure to like this video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more daily content. The 2023 Year in Review Awards should be up over on WrestleRant.com with WWE, AEW categories, nominees, stuff like that. I was hoping to get them up yesterday. I was busy yesterday, couldn't do it. Keep an eye out for that. Keep checking in on WrestleRant.com. Cast your votes. We'll talk about it on WrestleRant Radio at the end of the month. So keep an eye out for those going up at some point, hopefully a little bit later on today. Have an awesome one, guys. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.